Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. There is order in the universe. There is order in the universe. I have become, as of this minute, an IT genius.
It's about time word gets out about that.
Yeah, exactly. You've let the smoke out. I opened my mouth and the smoke came out. And you know what I just did 20 seconds ago? You're never going to guess in a million years what I did 20 seconds ago. Go ahead, Joe Fugate, guess.
What did you do 20 seconds ago?
That's not a guess. That's a question.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not on the payroll, buddy. Come on. You got to guess.
You became an IT genius.
No, I turned the record button on.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
This is already a show. This is a show. You're part of a show already. Hot diggity dog. Okay, let's make sure we're going to have to do a roll call. I had my podcast reviewed, and the guy said one of the mistakes I make is I don't introduce everybody. And I said, well, I really don't know anybody, so how can I introduce them? And he said my music was too long, which then I kind of ignored that because I like music. Okay, let me see if I can. All right, so first off, we have our very own Model Railroad News editor, the creator of HO Scale Quarterly, and the owner of a brand new, get this, a brand new pearl red 1995 Cadillac Eldorado.
Ooh.
Are you there, Tony?
I am here. Yes, I am here. How's everybody doing this evening?
Good.
And it is an almost brand new 28,000 actual miles.
I know. We got to tell look. There's 7 people here. I get to tell this. Although I'm assuming you guys listen to every single episode of A Modeler's Life. Is that correct?
Of course.
There you go.
that was Michael Peterson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm liking that guy already. He's pretty sharp. Okay, so anyways, about 2-3 months ago, Tony?
It's been maybe almost 2 months ago.
Yeah, he sends me this picture one day of this beautiful 1995 Cadillac Eldorado parked out in a farm field just north of Kansas City. He lives in Plattsburgh, Missouri. And he says, this guy only wants $8,500 for this car, and it had 27,000 miles, brand new tires. It was immaculate. 23-year-old car. And I said, man, that's a no-brainer. You got to buy it. And he bought it just for me. And I
and you got to drive it.
And I got
yourself.
to drive. I know.
As I watched it head down the street, I thought, well, probably won't see him or the car or Lionel again, but well, whatever.
Yeah, and I legitimately said to you, there was a fairly long period of time, a minute to a minute and a half, where I seriously thought it'd just keep going. Because I had my Nexus card. When I got to the border, although I could have kept it in my place in Florida. All right, I'm going to go down the list here. Next up, we have Scott Thornton, who is the creator of the Proto Throttle.
Well, I wouldn't say creator. I would say co-developer with Michael Peterson and Nathan Holmes. And Michael's here, too, so...
Yeah, but you told the first time we ever met, the first time I ever interviewed you, you said to me it was all your idea and you didn't have any help from anybody.
No, wait a second.
Actually, I think, though, strictly speaking, you conceived it, right?
Whoa.
Well, I was inspired by a YouTube video by a fella named Joe Fugate. You might remember. I don't remember Bruce's last name, but he took an NCE wireless throttle and converted it into a kind of a Rube Goldberg control stand, and that's what really got me inspired. I thought, wow, I want something like that because I'm a prototype modeler and I really wanted to operate my engines with something more realistic. And
I think that was Bruce Turner.
Bruce Turner. Okay, great. Well, I give credit to Bruce because he was the inspiration because I salivated all over that YouTube video, and then I And I had been working with Michael and Nathan because they own Iowa Scaled Engineering. And I became friends with those guys because they have connections. We both went to the same university, Iowa State, and we're both all native. Well, we're all native Iowans. And Michael models the Iowa Interstate too, as so does Joe Atkinson. He's on this call too. And so I got to know those guys and became friends. And then I asked them if I could help them out with some of their marketing materials because I'm a graphic designer and I wanted to barter with them so that I did design work and then they gave me electronics and it worked out great.
Well,
and then I got inspired by Bruce's video. And so I don't know how long ago, Michael, 2.5 years ago? I think 2.5 years ago, I threw the idea out to Michael. I said, do you think we could build one of these for me? And that's where it went.
Okay, so that's Scott. He's a man of few words, as we can all tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Next up, we have Michael Peterson from Iowa Scaled Engineering. Is that correct, Michael?
That is correct.
And the first time I ever talked to Michael, he said to me it was all his idea.
I don't think we've talked before, Lionel.
Oh. That must have been somebody else. And okay, and so Michael, you own Iowa Scaled Engineering along with?
Yeah, Nathan Holmes.
Okay. Now where's Nathan? Why isn't he talking to us tonight? Is he mad at us or something?
Nah, he had other stuff to do this weekend.
More important than this?
Yeah.
But he's listened to every episode of the podcast.
Oh, absolutely, I'm sure.
Perfect. And
I wish Lionel, I wish Nathan was here. I did my best to prod him to make time because he is a funny guy. He comes up with what I call Nathanisms. These he's got a quick wit and he would have been great. We'll have to get him on a show sometime.
okay, next up we have Joe Fugate, who is the owner, publisher, editor, the guy in charge at Model Railroad Hobbyist.
Hi there.
Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm good. And our paths crossed at the Kansas City show, but we never did quite manage to get together again after that.
No, I was going to interview you because I had a really, really good question. Would you like to hear what it was?
Yeah.
My really, really good question was, how come on the forums of Model Railroad Hobbyist you always end up like Dad? Like some of those topics will be going like crazy. We'll go for page and page and page, and all of a sudden, after about 3 days, Dad will come in and go, "All right, that's it. We're not talking about this anymore."
Well, that's what happens
Like,
when it's. Yeah, I liken the conversation to on the forums to like a bunch of people come and gather in our lobby or in a conference room that we have, right?
Right.
And so basically, you're on our property and you're having a conversation. And if in the middle of any conversation I was to stand up and say, "Okay, enough about this. Let's talk about something else," that might happen.
Right.
And
So
that's.
Are you just generally a grumpy old guy?
Well, notice if I was a grumpy old guy, I'd come in on the first day and say, "All right, that's it."
Well, that's a good point.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? So I'll let it go for 3 days, and then I'll.
All right.
I'll
Okay.
end.
But you know what's going to happen, don't you? The next time you go to stop a thread, you know what's going to happen. You know the first thing you're going to think of, aren't you? Me saying to you, "Are you just a grumpy old guy?" Next we have Joe Atkinson, and I have no idea who this person is.
I'm not even sure I belong on this call.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even know who you are.
I can Lionel, if you want me to, I can introduce the quickly.
I'd really rather you didn't.
Okay, all right.
All right, go ahead, Scott. You jump in there, buddy.
All right, I just wanted to help you out a little bit. But no, we've got Joe Atkinson and Tim Garland and Tom Klimovsky. And those guys are, well, in addition to Joe Fugate, they were some of our beta testers of the Proto Throttle. And all these guys were good contributors as we were developing the throttle. So I thought it'd be fun to get their perspective. Now, Joe models the Iowa Interstate, like I mentioned, and he's got a very nice layout, and he really ran with the whole proto throttle idea. And in fact, he operates, and Joe, you can jump in here. He operates his three of his throttles are proto throttle, and I think that encompasses everything that he uses on his layout. And he also was active on MRH, putting in different parameters for how to set up the proto throttle. And then Tim Garland, another beta tester, he lives in Georgia. He's a professional railroad engineer for Norfolk Southern. I hope that's okay to say, Tim.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Tim was another enthusiastic beta tester, and so he had a lot of good input as well. But he recently just got published in MRH. I'm sure a lot of you saw his article on how to operate like a pro, featuring the proto throttle. So from a prototype perspective, so Tim really brings the valuable experience there, and he's really been helpful to Michael and I to understand how things really work within a prototypical cab. And then Tom Klimaski, Tom's got another beautiful layout that was recently featured in a couple articles, actually, in Model Railroader, the Georgia Northeastern. And I don't know if you've seen that, but if you haven't, you should see it. He's got a beautiful blog as well. And Tom's another enthusiastic promoter of the proto throttle. And so anyway, that's the balance of the group. Thought those guys could contribute or not, but
Okay.
just thought it'd be fun to have invite them in and with our discussion.
And Tom Klimaski, you're a retired fire chief. Now, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
No.
Is it Tom?
It's Tom Klimaski, and I was not a chief, but I was a captain with the City of Miami Fire Department for almost 30 years. So I worked in the downtown area of the City of Miami.
Okay, well, I was told you were the chief by
That
somebody.
was my mistake. Sorry, Tom.
That's okay.
So let's assume you guys have. I know you guys have listened to all of the podcasts, but to start this off, I'm going to tell you my favorite Scott Thornton story. My favorite story about Proto Throttle and Scott Thornton, and then we'll go from there, because I think this will give you guys a lot of insight into what you're dealing with. Michael might already have an idea, but...
Oh, no. I know it's coming, and it's my opportunity to finally set the record straight.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll tell my version, and you tell your version.
All right.
So this happened at the Chicago RPM last year. And Scott was sitting at the table at the ESU decoder guy. What do you call those guys? ESU something or other.
Loke Sound.
Matt
Herman.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. Yeah, Matt Herman's table. It was the ESU. Matt Herman was there. So I talked to Matt Herman, and I saw Scott, and he was the Matt says, "Oh, you got to talk to this guy with this proto throttle." And Tony, we had already talked about the proto throttle, and our young right hand guy Scott Mason. He was Shane Mason. He was Shane the Young Gun Mason. He was all excited about this proto throttle. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. I'll go talk to this guy and I'll try to act, like I know what I'm doing. So I sit down and we have this great interview. Scott Thornton was a great interview. Speaks right up, answers a lot of questions, holds the microphone in the right place. So we're getting to the end of this thing and I'm like, man, this is really cool. This here proto throttle thing is really, really cool. And even when you just hold it, it just feels like it's well manufactured. So I'm saying to him, man, this is really, really cool. And I said, so, okay, so when are you guys releasing it? And he goes, we're releasing it, I don't know, next spring or something like that. And I said, oh, okay. I said, so how many these are you hoping to sell in your first year? Like 500? And there's like silence. And he's looking at me with these giant eyes and he goes, 500? Do you think with 500 would we sell that many? And I'm like, oh, and now behind my eyeballs in my brain, I'm going, oh, okay. So he's new to the business and he's not sure. So I'll pick a lower number, trying to, encourage him to go. So I go, oh, all right. So probably not maybe that many so I said, you're hoping to sell 100, right? And he goes, 100? You think we'd sell 100? And I'm thinking, I'm looking at this thing as like the greatest idea since sliced bread, and this guy's going, 100? I think we'd sell 100. And of course, guys are lining up at the table wanting to try this thing. And I'm like, okay. And now the interview's kind of stumbling to a close because I'm thinking, well, why are you doing this then? So, okay, now, Scott, you tell your version of that story.
Oh my goodness. I will say that we didn't do, we're a 3-man team, and the ultimate goal was originally was to have a throttle for myself and Michael and Nathan. And as we got into it, and the development went further along, and it became more obvious that this was going to be something that was going to be really cool, and there was a lot of things to work out, but it looked like it was going to come to fruition. But we didn't have any idea what the market would be. Plus, we were working through our costs and trying to develop, going back and forth, eventually on what this thing was going to cost. And so it was trial by fire, So when you asked me those questions, I probably did look like a deer in the headlights because we really didn't have any idea.
Okay, so then let me ask you this question, and anybody jump in at any point if you got something to say. Just jump in, and because we don't want to just listen to me and Scott talk. But so let me ask you this question. Then while Matt Herman and George Bogatuk were fighting over you, trying to get you to sit at each guy's table, like did you not have? At what point did you suddenly go, oh, well, maybe this is a pretty good idea? Because what I wanted to do was get a piece of flex track and start beating you on the head. Because everybody's going to want one of these.
There's a side story too that you'll enjoy, and Michael, I'm going to put him on the spot because, and right now I could hear him saying, "Oh no," but in the course of our development, see, I'm a designer by trade, and I like to think about, creative things, creative entrepreneurial avenues to go down. Michael by trade is an engineer. It's got to work, it's got to be practical, it's got to be functional.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we got further along in the development, he would tell me no a lot. Like I'd say, hey, let's do this. No, we can't do that. And it became kind of like our running joke that I was always told no. So I sent him a rubber stamp. I had signed up a rubber stamp with his likeness on it with the word no with an exclamation point, and I sent it to him, and I said, well, here, you can use this whenever you have a problem. So he brings that to the shows, and he stamps it whenever he thinks that I should be told no. So
well, that's not crazy enough. Remember there in Kansas City, we were having our Modeler's Life dinner in the same restaurant you were in, and you came into the room, and I said, no, go away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, that was fun.
All right, let me ask Joe Fugate. Joe, what did you think when you saw this thing? Because I immediately went, well, this is a really good idea.
Originally, I thought, I wonder if you could pull this off, because that's a pretty tall order to fit all that into a box and to make it behave, anyway, realistically. But yeah, and that's what I thought of the concept. I can tell you that even my impression of the concept was way below what my final experience was when I actually got one.
All right.
Well, we also wanted it to be very open. We wanted the development to be very transparent. It's developed open source via Michael and Nathan's. They're open source guys. They believe in it passionately. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yes, that's correct.
Michael left for a while.
He's stunned that I.
You know what? When I told him, when he heard that part of the story, when I said 100, you're going to sell 100, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he just shook his head and left the room for a while.
Every time I hear you say that, I roll my eyes.
I'm telling you, Michael, you have stumbled onto it. This thing is. How many of you guys sold now? This is right now. This is very early September. This is the first week of September. Kansas City has come and gone. Oh, this is the other thing, Michael. I am glad I have you in the room. And Joe, Mr. Fugate, I would like you to back me up on this one. If you want to. Although I know I make you nervous sometimes. But however, I'd like you to really try to back me up on this one. Michael, so every time I would say, so are you going to like the Springfield? This thing, I was looking at this thing and guys were like going crazy for this thing. And I said, so are you going to the Springfield show? No. You going to Kansas City National? No. And I'm like, what are you doing? People want to buy this thing. So how many of you sold now?
I think we're up to around 240.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So do you hope to sell 500?
Oh, it'd be great if we did, yeah.
Well, you're gonna, buddy. Trust me. If you'd start telling the world, you're gonna sell them. Joe, am I right or wrong?
I think so.
Oh yeah. Well, they've sold 250 already, and they're hiding in a closet over in the corner.
I know at the Kansas City show, a number of people came by, looked at it, and go, "Where do I get one?"
I know.
And I said it's for sale, and I go, "Well, where?" And so then we sent them over to the
Spring Creek.
Spring Creek booth. Yeah.
Yes. And the people were walking around with them. They were thrilled with these things. These things are cool. And all right, so now let's get to these other guys: Joe Atkinson, Tim Garland, and Tom Klomoski. Am I pronouncing that right, Tom? Is it Tom?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, Mr. Atkinson, where do you fit into this puzzle?
I worked with Michael and Nathan on some previous projects. I beta tested their wireless fast clock system. They were kind enough to allow me to get my hands on that. And I had, as a result of that, I think I had a slightly different perception when Scott first pitched this idea and mentioned that Michael and Nathan would be involved, because I was so impressed with their wireless fast clock system that I felt immediately like they were going to knock this one out of the park. I thought it was just, like anything of this nature, it's a matter of time. And I was sure they have a few roadblocks to overcome. But when the Proto Throttle came along, then I was allowed to get my hands on an early version and kind of play around with it and offer feedback and so on. And I happen to be a fairly low tech mindset, and so I think when it comes to something like this, if they can make it simple enough for me to install it successfully, then they've got a winner. And so that's kind of where I come into the game. I think I'm the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, but you know what, Tony, back me up on this one. We played with it at the second annual Modeler's Life picnic there in Rochelle, Illinois, which, by the way, none of you guys showed up to. I was crushed that none of you guys came.
Hey, it was during the St. Louis RPM. What were we supposed to do?
So, Tony, you saw I started using the thing, and within 5 minutes I was playing with it like nobody's business.
Exactly. Yeah, I was surprised. Picked it right up. And the night before, we'd been to the St. Louis RPM, Shane Mason and I, and we stayed at my folks because they're in the St. Louis area. And Shane set it up. And my dad, who's also is DCC challenged and that kind of thing, that he thought it was really awesome. So yeah, the learning curve is really not there for it. I don't think it's a very easy thing to get into and use.
The brake action is the coolest thing of all. I love how you set the throttle speed and then you can use the brake action. I mean, it's very, very cool. It's very cool. All right, Mr. Garland, where do you fit into this puzzle?
Well, I actually got active in their when they had the forum going on in MRH, and I told them what I did for a living and try to give them some feedback and some input on my part. And so I was more than thrilled when they asked if I'd be a beta tester. The Proto Throttle is definitely a game changer compared to other controllers. I'm surprised somebody else hasn't tried to do something like this earlier. there are some things you can do with the Proto throttle that's very similar to what you do on the prototype. Now, it doesn't do everything exactly like what we can do on the prototype, but there are certain scenarios that you can do that's really similar. You can pull it off pretty much the same way you can run a real train. It has, for me personally, I use the Proto throttle on my layout in the yard jobs, doing switching operations. I think it's really, really suited for that, where you can do a lot of things similar to how I'd run the real thing. But it's good for other scenarios too. And I love it. I rarely pick my other controllers up now, to be honest with you.
I know. That's what it feels like to me, too. It's like very, very cool. So how did you meet Scott? Or these guys?
Well, I got to talking to him, and he contacted me.
Well, I know he doesn't go to any shows, so how did you get talking to him?
Well, I got through MRH's on MRH on the forum. They started their blog on the Proto throttle.
All right.
One of the things I did when they sent me mine, and I didn't realize it until Michael told me that you could actually cut that emergency brake feature off of the brake. And once I did that, that really made it more like the prototype, because that brake to me is just like the independent brake on the locomotive.
I know that. I don't know anything about operating a real locomotive, but I mean, I thought the brake action was the coolest part of the whole thing. Well,
I didn't like it, putting it all the way over and it going into an emergency.
Right. Yeah,
because I was using the throttle the same way I would use the independent brake on a real locomotive.
Right.
And a lot of times in switching operations, you don't even touch the train line brake, the automatic brake. You only use the engine brake, and use a lot of times the rail cars in the yard are actually, all the air tanks are bled off on the rail cars, and there's no air on the cars. So the only thing you can stop the movement with is just the engine brakes.
Right.
And so in that scenario, the Proto throttle is exactly the same. And so I find it's really enjoyable to me, especially if you have good decoders and you have your acceleration and deceleration values set up correctly, where you can do a lot of coasting with it. And then if you do the brakes just right, it's really fun. And I enjoy it. I applaud Michael and Scott for coming up with the idea, and I look forward to seeing what else they can come up with, because I don't think they're stopping here. I think they're going to continue to move on.
Well, that's cool. They can move on, but they still got to get this thing out to the public, because this is cool, and they need to. Are you guys going to Springfield this year? Hello, Scott.
I'd like to.
All right. And why wouldn't you? What do you need money? Are you like what is the problem? What is the problem for you going to Springfield? This is okay. Another insight, because a lot of the regular listeners will know this. Me and Tony, I constantly complain to Tony, the editor of Model Railroad News over there in Kansas City, and the creator of HO Collector Quarterly. I constantly complain. Why aren't these guys out in the public showing this thing off? Because it's very, very cool. So why can you not go to Springfield?
Well, actually, if we don't go physically, I mean, I'd really love to go. I've heard amazing things about that show. Just the scale of the show alone sounds incredibly fun.
Help me out here, Mr. Fugate.
But but we have set up two dealers. We work with Caboose out of Denver and Spring Creek Model Trains, and I'm not sure about Caboose, but I know Spring Creek will be at Springfield. And Michael built a demo layout, a little small switching layout that we had at Kansas City, and that was for Spring Creek to take to any of their shows. So it will be there, and people will be able to try out the throttle and operate a locomotive. So,
but they want to talk. They want to talk to you.
Yeah.
They want to talk to the Proto throttle guy.
Sure.
They want to they want to touch them. They want to tug on your hair. They want to see you. They want to look in your eyes. They want to see that magic. How do we get you to Springfield and get you guys flogging this thing to death?
I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Again, I'm in the same boat as Scott. I'd like to go. A lot of it is that all three of us have day jobs, and this is a side project, and so
Right.
you've got time off work and family commitments and other things that we have to consider. But I really would like to go. So we'll see as time gets closer.
See what you guys
Yeah.
what you guys don't realize. It's like what you have here is a hit song, and now you've decided you're not going on tour, and you're not going to let the world hear you guys perform your hit song. You see,
Yeah.
it's like you've created this really cool thing, and now it's your responsibility to the model railroad world to get it out there. I'm sorry, but life is hard, but this is just a commitment you've got to make.
Yeah.
Hey, Lionel, this is Joe Atkinson. I would suggest that we're going to see the Proto Throttle really snowball the more people adopt this. I know, personally speaking, when I've had people over, and 9 times out of 10, if people pick one up and they operate on,
Yes.
just a few minutes on the
Yes.
layout, they are hooked and they're going home and ordering one. And I think we're going to see it just naturally grow as a result of that, and continue to snowball as more people get it, and we create more opportunities for other people to try them out on friends' layouts and so on.
I agree with you. I think okay, let's talk to Mr. Klomoski. So how do you fit into this whole thing?
Well, Tim and I have been friends for a long time, and I was also following the posts there on MRH about the Proto Throttle, and I saw, like Scott mentioned, the very first one that they was developed. I thought that was pretty cool. Then when I saw that they were developing this one, I was really interested, and Tim and I kind of followed it together. And then when Tim got his Proto Throttle, I went over and I was the one that videotaped the operating session where Tim and his conductor friend were doing the Proto Throttle and having prototypical communication. I've done lots of videos on my layout. I've got a pretty good YouTube channel and website and stuff. So I offered to do the videos and help Scott promote the product because I'm such a believer in it. And once I pried it out of Tim's hands and he let me try it for a few minutes, I was hooked. I mean, this thing was amazing. And then I was tied in with the testing. One of the reasons why I was able to get it was because I run Digitrax, which was one of the problems with trying to get the Proto Throttle set up was getting it to work with all the different manufacturers. So Michael and Nathan had to do a little bit of a workaround through the LNWI, which is your LocoNet connection. So I was able to get it here and test it on my layout. And again, kind of like you guys are talking, if I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. So I took the instructions, went through it, and gave them some feedback on what I thought was, ways to maybe improve the language or the instructions and stuff, and then operated with it and identified any little issues that I might have had.
So you live, how far apart do you and Tim live apart?
We're about 3 hours apart. Tim lives south of Atlanta, and I'm up in the mountains of North Georgia. So it's a little bit of a drive.
So how did
Tom
you?
lives way out away from he lives way out away from civilization.
Attaboy. So how did?
Where I want to be.
Okay.
Tom, tell him about your guest operators, because Tom holds pretty regular operating sessions, and he's had some people that previously said no, they're never gonna. It's either too expensive or too large. And then what's happened after they've got their hands on one?
Well, I went down to I'm a member of the NMRA Piedmont division, which meets down in Atlanta. So I went down to one of their meetings and just, while I had the Proto Throttle here for beta testing, I took it down there and just did a presentation on it. And, there was we'll say a somewhat warm reception of it, but nobody was really that interested. I mean, I didn't get to actually operate it. So just showing it, you really don't, get the whole effect. So I recently had an operating session where 3 guys came up, and one of the gentlemen that came up, he was the first one to jump at operating it. I showed him how to make the controls work and give him about 30 seconds of training, and then set him loose with the local switch crew. And after about 5 minutes, his remarks were, "I don't care how much it costs anymore. I want one."
Well, there you go. And did he say he was going to go to Springfield to buy it?
That's pretty much been the way. Yeah. Well, that's the way it is. Once somebody tries it, then you can't go back to a regular throttle. And one of the worst days of my life was the day I had to box it up and send it back to the next beta tester. I couldn't wait to get my own.
I know. Well, you guys at least got asked. I never even got asked. I think I made Scott mad in Chicago.
No, you didn't make me mad.
Did you really think when you came into our dinner room there in Kansas City, did you think that you had any chance of being asked to join us?
No,
No,
I saw how everyone looked at me, and I said, I better get out of here. This is scary.
So, Tom, you said you have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I do.
What's the name of it?
It's real original. It's my first name and last name, so it's Thomas Klomoski.
All right, Thomas Klomoski. Okay.
If you go onto YouTube, or if you put in Georgia Northeastern, which is the prototype short line that I model, I've kind of taken over all the videos there. So if you can't find me by my name, type in Georgia Northeastern, and along with some prototype videos, you'll probably run into one of my model railroad videos. Also, I have a website you can go on. It's thomasklomoski.com, and I've got pictures of my layout and a blog and some other stuff. And I really kind of got into this because I was a trainman on the Blue Ridge Scenic Railroad for 5 years. So I really got into the prototype operations, and got to ride in the cab with the engineer and do the brake test, do all that other stuff. And I mean, operating with this Proto throttle's just like being in the cab.
I know, it's amazing how good. I was to be completely honest with you, I was like, there was a lot of furor and carrying on, and our guy that's regular on our show, Shane Mason, he's a young guy. He's 21 years old. He's very enthusiastic. Great guy. Apparently the hobby's dying, but nobody told him. So anyways, he was like, oh man, this thing is so cool. And then when he gave it to me and handed it to me, I was going to very politely go, okay, sure. And, use it for 5 minutes and hand it back. And it was like you say, as soon as you start using it, it's so well built and so well constructed and works so well. It's like immediately like you're going, well, this is cool. You just immediately you're going, this is cool. All right, Tim, I have one question for you, and then we're going to talk to Mr. Peterson.
Okay.
You're an engineer for the Norfolk Southern.
Yes, and I actually have my own YouTube channel too, and I don't model Norfolk Southern. No, I actually my railroad. I'm a freelancer. I do Seaboard Central, and it has its own YouTube channel and Facebook page. I had to throw that in there.
Well, absolutely. What's your YouTube channel called?
Seaboard Central.
Seaboard Central.
And yeah, what would you ask me about Norfolk Southern again?
I asked you. You're an engineer on the Norfolk Southern.
Yes, sir. I got hired out 1996, July 96, as a conductor. Before that, I worked for a little short line.
Right.
I've done railroading ever since I've been out of high school. Believe it or not, I ran a steam train ride at Six Flags over Georgia while I was in college.
Oh, really?
So I've been in trains my whole life, and I've been an engineer since 2000. 7 years I went downtown Atlanta and worked as a supervisor in rail car management. I managed rail cars, and then came back to being a locomotive engineer because that's where my heart is. I love it. Have enough seniority now to where I can work a daylight job and have the weekends off, so that's good. And it does give me a lot of time for modeling.
So let me ask you this question, because we have a regular fella on our show. His name is Mike Ostertag. We call him Spoon because he's always stirring up trouble. But he's a locomotive engineer for the Canadian National, working out of Manitowoc, Wisconsin right now. And there's a lot of prototype There's a lot of prototype railroaders in model railroading.
There are. Some of them don't admit to it. And a railroader, it's a different lifestyle. Everybody will tell you that's a railroader. You gotta like it, otherwise you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't put up with it. And there's a lot of guys that they know I'm a model railroader. I tell the guys I work with I'm a model railroader, and they appreciate it. They go to my Facebook page or the YouTube channel, and they can see what I do. And to me, the real thing what I do on my day job is kind of like where I go take notes for my model railroad. So I like to look and see what I see on the prototype and try to bring that back in to my own little world in the basement where I can escape and try to copy what I see. The Proto Throttle is just another tool in my toolbox to make, because I the more realistic I can make it, the more, whether it's the feel of doing something or the look of doing something, to me, that's what I enjoy the most.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And so I've had the people that I've had over in my operating sessions, they love it too. It's like, I got to get me one of these. It's definitely something after you use it for the first time. When you go to the old rotary knob or the other controllers, you're like, wow, it's just not the same thing,
Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, it's very, very cool. So, you and Tom are friends, and how did you guys meet? You guys met on the forum, or how did you guys know each other?
Well, I met Tom through, he had his YouTube channel.
Okay.
And I really liked what he was doing, because his railroad is beautiful. He has a beautiful layout. And anytime I go online and like Joe Atkinson's layout, and I see something where you can look at a photograph of the layout and it almost looks like you're looking at the real thing.
Right.
That's what I love. And so I contacted Tom. I knew he said he was from Georgia, and he invited me up for a little operating session there. And then we've been to each other's places and operated on each other's layouts.
Okay.
And so it's good. It's a good friendship. And Tom has taught me I always love the feedback he gives me. And he'll say,
right.
Well, maybe try this, and I have, and it's worked. And he's given me some great advice.
Well, that's cool. I'm going to have to interview you guys individually on the Old Modelers Life podcast. And as soon as you guys send in your check for $312, I'll get right on that. I'm just kidding.
Hey, Lionel, can I interrupt for a minute?
No, I'd really rather you didn't.
Okay, thank you. You brought up a good point, though, and I think Joe Fugate can speak to this in terms of operating with a regular knob throttle versus the Proto throttle, because I remember, Joe, you telling me at one point that you could be much more precise, like a prototype engineer, in how you maneuvered the train and couple. Could you speak to that? Because I thought that was always interesting.
Sure. Yeah, I had actually started experimenting with lots of momentum and braking in the current crop of sound throttles on my layout before this product ever was even conceived. And so I already was familiar with the notion of having to plan ahead and all of that with a knobby throttle. But what I really liked when I got my hands on a Proto throttle was the ability to go, okay, I'm going to be in notch 2. And when I get to this bridge, I'm going to drop to idle and just let it coast. And after experimenting with the throttle a bit, I would know then that when I do that, when I get to this bridge and I go to idle, it's going to coast and stop there. And it just so happens that that's where I left this cut of cars. So it's going to coast right into that cut of cars and couple up just as pretty as you please. Now, try to get that precision with a knobby throttle. That's difficult.
So they've built it that it's been that well built that it's that easy or that good to use. Does that make sense? Did that make sense?
Yes, it is. Yes, and I know maybe Tim can speak to this, but I have heard stories of prototype engineers that will say, okay, when we pass this tree or whatever here, or past this fence post, that's when I have to start setting the brakes, that kind of thing. They've done this enough, they learned landmarks that they will use to actually help them when they operate.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, as far as the real thing goes, is you learn the lay of the land, whether you're at the bottom of a grade or at the top of a grade, and also the train itself can dictate, because you may pull over the top of a hill a little longer with some trains, or a short heavy train, you would come out of the throttle a lot sooner than a longer train that would be draping over the crest of a hill. But you can do something, especially with some of these decoders like the ESU and the Tsunami 2 decoder. You can with Michael putting that auxiliary button into adding that effect, you can mimic the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like Joe said, what I normally do is I'll notch out on the throttle like I would on the prototype, especially if I'm switching in the yard. I'll get the engines rolling, and then I'll just knock it out of throttle and let it coast. And if I work the brake just right, I can bring it right in smoothly to a smooth coupling, and that's what I aim for. So it's really, once you pick one up, and if I give it to any of my other engineers, they're just mesmerized by how realistic this Proto throttle is compared to the real thing.
Just another example, Lionel, is like I use Loc sound decoders.
All right, hang on a minute. Before we go on, it's Lionel, not Lionel. Lionel is the trains. Lionel is the there. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I got that lectured long ago.
Oh, okay.
It's not 3 syllables. It's just all run together. Do it with a Sudbury slur.
But I was going to say that depending on your decoder, but like Soundtracks, TCS, Loc Sound, I mean, they're all good decoders. They all have their pluses and minuses. They're all going to continue to get better in terms of braking characteristics, I believe. So it's going to all bode well for the use of the throttle, the Proto throttle. I personally use Loc Sound, and one thing that Michael built into the throttle, into the throttle's brake, is he built a variable brake where because Loc Sound brakes are just on or off, and he built in a pulsating, you could just think of it as a pulsating switch, on, off, on, off, on, off. And as you apply the brake increases, the percentage of brake. And in effect, when you have high momentum, the brake is really fun to operate because it allows you to, well, what I call feather. I don't know if this is super accurate, but basically, if you go down to idle, you've got your train moving at let's say medium speed, and then you apply the brake, the train will slow, and then you can release the brake and it'll continue to coast, and then you can apply it again and it'll continue to slow again. And that type of playability, I guess, is a lot of fun. And I don't think you can really get that same effect with standard throttle. So that type of prototypical operation, I think, would appeal to a lot of modelers because it's just a feature in addition to the notching. Now, with the throttle, the notching is a true notch. There's detent in each position of the 8 notches. So you have the feel of a prototypical control. And the reverser is the same way. It's notched. And one thing I was also going to point out when Tim was talking, it reminded me that the throttle also allows modelers to replicate prototypical safety standards. There's things called red zone, and how do they refer to it, Tim, on the Norfolk Southern?
Three-step protection.
Okay.
And also, when you're talking about feathering the brake, just want to point out that when a locomotive engineer feathers the brake, what do you mean by feathering the brake? Somebody might say, what does that mean? Well, there's some engines have 3 braking systems. You have the independent, which controls the actual brakes on the locomotive itself. You have a train brake, which controls the brakes on the rail cars. And you have a dynamic brake on some locomotives to help. And the dynamic brake is for road trains to instead of it saves wear and tear on the other braking systems. But the only way you feather the brake is with the independent brake. Mm-hmm. And that is in a scenario when you would need to feather the brake, which I do constantly on a daily basis, it controls the speed of the locomotives in during switching operations. If you apply too much brake, you can release a little bit. You can go back and forth with the brake, just playing with the brake.
Right.
And to control the movement, and like Joe mentioned before, being able to stop it where you want it to stop.
Right.
And you can't feather the brake with the other braking systems, but you can be that independent.
Right, but one thing too is, and we've had some modelers mention this. They want all the braking systems. Well, realistically, in the model railroading realm, you're not going to be able to replicate train brakes, So, you might be able to with sound and things like that, but in terms of how the brake responds, it's more the Proto throttle, like Tim said, replicates more the independent brake. But it's still a lot of fun.
That's a very fun. Okay, let's get to the meat of this subject here. Let's get down to the brass tacks. Let's speak with Mr. Peterson. So, Mr. Peterson, is any of this true that Scott has done all this by himself?
Yes, he has done every single bit of it himself.
Oh man.
Okay, well
I blame him for every bit of it.
Yeah.
Especially when they call with problems. Yeah, you better talk to Scott.
So Scott didn't really believe us when Nathan and I told him that he's going to be the point man for technical support, but he's gotten his fair share of that.
Talk about the fear of the Lord. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So how did you you own Iowa Scaled Engineering?
That's correct.
Right, which obviously is located in Colorado.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's clear that up. I think I've heard that story before, but you originally started in Iowa?
No, Nathan and I, like Scott said, are both native Iowans. We both ended up in Colorado due to our jobs, our day jobs. And then a few years ago, we had this wild and crazy idea to start a company to make hobbyist and model railroad electronics and see how it did.
Right. And you guys have done. And how long ago was that?
I think it was the end of 2011 is when we started putting things together.
Okay. And you mind if I ask how old of a man you are?
40.
So you're just a young guy. You're young. You're young. Apparently, according to the NMRA, everybody's just under the age of 103. But you're 40, so that's good. So there's a lot more younger people in this hobby. I'm convinced that this hobby is like growing like crazy. You know what, guys? Some of you have listened. I can't believe you guys haven't all listened to every single episode. I am crushed. So some of you who have never,
I have since last fall when you interviewed Scott. So.
Oh, okay. There you go. Excellent.
Yeah, we never said that, Lionel.
Okay. I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I may be wrong. I've been wrong before in my life. I forget what it was, but I was wrong once. I am convinced this hobby, because of social media, is growing like crazy, and it's going to explode, and we're all going to be covered in model railroad goo.
It's definitely the best time to be in the hobby with the advancements that the hobby has right now. I never, in my wildest dreams, would have thought we'd have a throttle like this.
Exactly.
And look at everything else that just seems like it's coming out every day.
Oh, I mean,
exactly.
The releases that we see now, we've talked about this before on, I can't remember, I think it was the late 60s, either Jim Conway's old JMC distributor out of Chicago, before he moved to Arizona with Concord, or it was Walther's catalog from around 1970 that I'd picked up at a show. And my dad picked it up to look at it, and he said, "Why would anybody want to be a model railroader looking at this? There's nothing available compared." And yet he said, "This is when I started in the hobby, and it was so exciting. And yet I look at this now and think there was nothing available compared to today." I mean, between the technology and just the constant flow of new releases, there's never been a better time to be in model railroading easily.
Absolutely.
The other thing, Lionel, just to mention is if you look at Ken Patterson's show, and every week there's lots of young faces on that show, and it just keeps going and going and going with more young faces. So those people are coming from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And he has that What's Neat This Week podcast.
Right, the weekly show, yes.
The weekly show. And which one was, he's done 47 of them. Which one was your favorite, Joe?
Number 42.
Oh, so close. No, you missed by 2. It was 44 was your favorite one, Joe.
Oh, yes, that's right. It was, wasn't it? I was thinking of the one with the St. Louis guys in it, but
no, you were meaning to think of the one with me in it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, number 44. There you go. That's your answer. Okay, Mike. So how did you guys meet? How did you and Scott meet? Like, this sounds to me like a scary story that, you know how when you're in a movie and you're at a scary part in the movie and you kind of pull your hat over your eyes? I think we're coming to that part of the story.
Well, Scott pretty much had it correct. Nathan and I were struggling for a few years to get ourselves known. I was putting together some pretty lame attempts at advertising in MRH magazine. I think actually Scott took pity on us as a graphic designer and wanted to help out our ad quality.
I actually had selfish intentions. I knew from Joe and others that these guys built really good electronics, and their customer service was seriously second to none. And so I needed their help. So that's why.
So you had the idea and you called them up. So what came first? You helped them with their advertising, or you went to them with completely selfish means wanting to get your throttle built?
No.
So you went.
No, actually, I come up with different ideas, and I throw it out to those two guys and say, can you build this? Like, I came to Michael and I wanted a sound module, because I wanted to build I've got 3 curves in my small little branch line, and I wanted to have independent and random flange squeal. And so I threw out the idea, could you guys build a sound module? And then, so boom, they built one. And then I asked him, could you build an Arduino shield to, make these sounds come out of it? And he built it for me. And then I came up with the idea that I wanted to have a cloud shadow simulator for my layout. And he built that. And so you guys just built up a relationship like that. That's right. And I happened to, Michael and Nathan would both scoff at this, but they're really sharp guys and they know what they're doing in the electronic realm. And so they just have a way about them where they solve problems and they're very engaged. And so it's really nice to work with them, because especially with the Proto Throttle, because every electronic adventure has its issues, and they just attack problems and solve them and get creative, and it's.
So Michael, I have a question for you. Scott, could you just unplug your earphones for a minute?
Sure.
Michael, does he seem as annoying to you as he does to me? So he comes to you with all these. Scott, you're a very engaging young man. How old are you, Scott?
I'm 57.
See, you're supposed to be 103. Joe, how old? Joe Atkinson, how old are you?
I am 52.
See, you're not even close. Tim?
I'm 48.
And not even close. How about you, Tom?
56.
See, you guys aren't old enough yet. You should probably drop out of the hobby for 10 years and then pick it up again. So, okay, Michael. So he's coming to you with all these ideas and everything. He wants a HO scale ice cube maker, and you make him one.
Yeah.
Well, not every idea makes it through. Scott alluded to the nose stamp, and that gets used quite often.
So what did you think when he first came to you with this idea of the Proto Throttle?
It was pretty much, we'll look at it. And I think I brushed him off for a couple months until he came back and asked again. And at that point, it was just for him. Scott just wanted us to build basically a copy of the one he saw in that video. And so we tossed that around for, I don't know, a few weeks, looking at how to do it, how to maybe make it better, and eventually came to the conclusion that copying what was there wasn't going to be the right way to do it. We would just build something, mainly because he had an MRC system at that point, and Throttle that the guy in the video built was NCE. And the MRC system was completely closed. We had no idea how to interface to it. And our thought there was build something completely separate, and then use JMRI to talk to his DCC system. And then that kind of led to, I think at that point, Scott, is that about when you started posting on MRH?
Yes. We wanted to like I said, make it real transparent and get a lot of input from other modelers. And so I just threw the idea out on a MRH thread, and it went from there. And we kept the thread going for almost the full 2 years of development. And it was great because modelers could chime in and say what they wanted, and we just went from there. And in addition, at the time that Michael and Nathan were thinking about helping develop something like this, Michael and I were going back and forth and talking about like what type of electronic components could go in it. You
know,
I think we lost Scott.
Perfect.
Yeah, he went poof. He shows up as still here. Maybe his mic went dead or the batteries went dead or something.
If he calls in, don't answer. So he comes to you. So you were going to build this as a one-off. Wouldn't that be really kind of expensive?
Yeah, absolutely. But we were, I guess you could say it was helping out a friend.
How long had you known him by the time he came to you with this Proto Throttle idea?
I think it had been a year and a half or so, probably.
And boy, so you only know a guy for a year and a half, and you're going to build this whole cool thing for them. That's pretty cool. So then, how long after? So it took you a couple of months to kind of warm up to even considering it. And then, so what year is this? What time in the star date? What time in star date is this? Star date calendar log, captain's log. What time is this?
I would have to say probably end of 2015, beginning of 2016, maybe. It must have been beginning of 2016.
All right. And so how long did it take you to get it from an idea to something that was even like possibly doable?
Joe, didn't we get you the first one in the spring of 2017?
Yeah, I think it was April of 2017.
Yeah, so it was about a year or so.
Like, was it really hard to do, or was it sort of hard to do, or? It sounds to me like it would be really hard to do.
The engineering wasn't that hard. The hardest part was finding the components, like the encoders that gave the right tactile feel for the notches, had the right angle to match the swing we wanted. Just finding all those components was the hardest part.
And where would you find these components?
The World Wide Web.
Oh yeah.
Just looking at different vendors. We're pretty familiar with what vendors are out there, and searching, getting samples, trying them out.
So you work as an electrical engineer.
Yes.
Is that what you do full time?
Correct.
So then you had some sort of, and is that what Nathan does as well?
He's more software engineer, software design.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you and Nathan know each other?
We both went to Iowa State. We met each other there.
Is that the home of the Hawkeyes?
No.
Oh,
Cyclones.
The Cyclones. Where are the Hawkeyes?
Iowa City.
Okay.
We don't.
Iowa City. Okay. Well, they're Iowa.
Yeah, we don't talk about the Hawkeyes though.
All right. Well, you just did. They paid me to get that in there. So okay, but we gotta try to give people, because more and more people. Joe, Tim, and Tom. Joe Atkinson. Mr. Atkinson, do you have a nickname?
We don't want to discuss that here.
No, I didn't say what are you. I said, do you have a nickname? Okay, we'll call you Mr. Fugate. Mr. Fugate. Joe. So Joe, Tim, and Tom. Like, where were you guys in the batting order? Like okay, so like they get this built kind of thing in 2017, and like, are you guys kind of going, what is this? Like, did all you guys meet on the thread on MRH?
I think we had all known of each other and interacted well prior to this time, but our interests were definitely kind of unified on the front of the Proto Throttle. So we've done a lot of interaction since that time and shared a lot of ideas, I think.
You probably consider us. We're probably all considered prototype modelers, wouldn't you say, Joe?
I would say so. Sure.
Yeah, all of us kind of have the same taste when it comes to modeling. And Joe, he actually has an earlier version of the Proto Throttle. He was the first, and then I was the second, and Tom was the last. Joe uses Lens, I use NCE, and Tom uses Digitrax. So that gave them an opportunity to operate with 3 different systems.
Okay. And so Michael, the thing is very well built and crafted. So you're going to have to answer these questions. So Scott wants back in. He says he lost his connection.
I'm back.
Great. Well, we missed you.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you we missed you.
Thanks.
So have I got everybody else still?
Still here.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool. All right. Cool. So all right. So the thing is very well crafted, Michael. Like it's a quality piece of. I think one of the things that gets people excited is as soon as you pick it up in your hand, it's a quality piece of machinery. So, like, what is it that made? What is about? Like, what is your background that you must understand the difference between quality and average? Like, how did you come along? Like, there's got to be more to this than simply Scott showed up and said, "Hey, I'd like one of these," and then poof, 6 months later you had one in your hand. I mean, it must have been a lot of work to develop it to get to this point.
A lot of that touch and feel came from Scott. Actually, he worked with a machinist there in Ames to develop the faceplate and the whole design of it and how it felt. And so I was really trying to conform the electronics to that. And it was definitely a back and forth for several months of, well, let's move this here and change this a little bit. But really, I think I would have to credit Scott with the look and feel piece of it, because he definitely drove that. That wasn't me.
So how did you decide on the size? Scott?
Oh, well, Michael could speak more to that. That was driven.
Oh, no, come on,
Okay,
you guys. Time out here.
right.
Wait a minute. Now you're just frustrating the crap out of me.
I'm
Michael
sorry.
says,
No, we were just.
no, I'm talking here. I can feel my lips moving. So Michael says you were the guy in charge of, or were getting the look and the feel of it. So is that in fact the case, or were you guys working together? Because you guys have got to. This is like trying to get you guys to go to Springfield. People are gonna be interested. I bet you. You know what, Joe, Tim, and Tom, are people not going to be interested in how these guys made this thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So together did you come up with the size of the thing that you would hold in your hand, or like? How did you come up with that, for starters?
Well, yeah, it started out with what Scott wanted, and then we looked at how all the pieces inside would fit, and just it was a number of iterations from there that we got to this current shape and size. I think you started out with something a little smaller, Scott, and then eventually we had to increase the size a little bit. And just a very practical consideration is we don't have a custom box. It's an off-the-shelf box, so we were limited in what we could choose in terms of that for the right depth, and they come in only certain lengths and widths. And so we happened to find this box. It was very close to what our design looked like it could accommodate, and so just through a bunch of iteration, because you're an electrical engineer and you knew where to go shop it for this stuff, you found this box at one of your basic suppliers. Yeah, I think actually Scott happened to find this particular one, but it was, we had a bunch of options and we were trying them all out.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say, it truly was a collaborative effort in terms of the look. Like I wanted to have a metal faceplate because I wanted modelers to have that feel, that it's a real miniature control stand. I didn't want to have plastic.
Right.
So when I got in touch with a machine shop that I liked and that they were willing to take us on, we relied on their expertise too. So it was really a fun process, but there was a lot of back and forth. But then they recommended aluminum, and they said, yeah, we could mill this out. It'll be great. It'll fit your needs. You can anodize it, which we do. And we went from there.
So, Mr. Fugate.
Yes, sir.
When you first heard of this idea, and did you actually think it would come to fruition to this quality?
I thought it was a bit pie in the sky at first. Wasn't sure that they could actually pull it off at a price that modelers would want to pay.
Right. And what do you think of the price? I mean, to me, it seems like it's not unreasonable. Like any model railroader to tell you, oh, $500, that's a lot of money, but I'm going to buy 10 SD45s or whatever, -2s.
Yeah.
And
for anyone who's serious about the hobby, you just go look at their stash, right, and see how much they're willing to pay for stuff. So, one way to think of this is you could just go look through your stash, look at, let's get real, look at something that you probably never get to. Could you sell enough of your stash to afford a $500 thing? And it's probably very easy for 90% of the modelers out there to do that.
I say that all the time. When people tell me the same thing, I can't afford that right now. I'd like to have it, but it's too expensive. And I tell them, look, I've got 2 Athearn Genesis BNSF SD70 Aces. I would gladly sell right now to buy another Proto Throttle, because to me, when you see the value in it, and the throttle is something you're going to use every time you operate the layout. You may have a collection of 20 locomotives and rarely use all of them at the same time. And so you got to see what's worth more to you. And to me, that's definitely more of a value to me. I would gladly sell 2 of my sound-equipped locomotives to get another Proto Throttle, because it's definitely more value.
Okay, so let's go right to the source here. Tony Cook, editor of Model Railroad News.
Yes, sir.
Guy that has his finger on the pulse of the hobby as far as product goes. What do you think about the price of this thing?
I don't think the price is a concern at all. I mean, for what it is, I think that once you've used it, once you've experienced it, it's such a fun product that, as you say, this is something you're going to use every time you operate your layout. And if you put down $300 for a sound-equipped locomotive, having a throttle like this to run it, it's no big deal. Yeah, I don't think the price is prohibitive at all.
And have you heard any? I'm sorry, somebody was going to say something.
Oh, this is Joe. I was just going to jump in and say I found myself a month ago writing a post about the Proto Throttle, about something that just basically the excitement of operating with it. And this is about 18 months after I first got it, and it occurred to me at that time, for the money that went into these, when was the last time that I spent $200, $250 on a new locomotive? And I was so excited about it a year and a half later that I was still writing to friends about it. And that's the kind of impact that the Proto Throttle has had on the hobby for me. I have said time and time again, it is a game changer, and it really, really is. As much as DCC, as much as sound itself, I think the Proto Throttle has impacted my enjoyment of the hobby.
Yeah.
So when can I chime in with my feelings on it? On this
probably about an hour and a half from now. Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Fugate. Yes, please.
Okay.
And let's not ignore the fact, Mr. Fugate, if I may suck up to you for a minute. I mean, I have told you this in person. I admire what you've done in the hobby. I have admired how you've been a pioneer in the online magazine. What would we call it? Online magazine road. It's like let's not ignore the fact that you've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this hobby. So obviously, your opinion on this is very valuable. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, what's interesting to me is the Proto Throttle brings everything together in a way that you've never seen before in the hobby. And for instance, you remember the True Action Throttle, which was the old throttle design that Len Westcott designed back in the 60s. There were several iterations of that. I actually got to play with one of those one time, and I thought it was interesting, but it didn't grab me. It wasn't that compelling, So it was kind of an interesting novelty, is the way that I saw it. And so then, of course, sound comes along, and I put some sound decoders in some of my locomotives. And I always thought sound was interesting, but it wasn't like totally compelling. It's like, I got to die to get this kind of feeling, right?
Right. Right.
And so then with the Proto Throttle, what has happened now that we've got the modern crop of sound decoders with braking features in them, now with the Proto Throttle, when I crank up the throttle and I hear the prime mover rev up immediately in response to what I've done on the throttle, and then the locomotive slowly comes up to speed, and then when I apply the brake and the locomotive comes to a stop, and I hear the brake squeal as it stops, all of a sudden the sound has a purpose now, because I get
good point.
Get immediate feedback. So everything's come together. We've got the back EMF and the momentum and the sound, and now a tactile device that matches what I'm trying to get the locomotive to do, and everything lines up. And so it's a complete package now. Individually, the pieces were interesting, but when you put it all together, it becomes extremely compelling. And again, I agree with the game changer comment. It totally transforms running trains. When I pick up a regular knobby throttle now, it's just not the same. It's difficult to describe unless you've actually tried it yourself.
Also, it makes you slow down.
That's the other thing.
It makes you slow down. Yeah.
That's the other thing that's amazing, because what you quickly find when you operate this way is that if you run slow, you can stop accurately. If you run fast, it's difficult to stop on a dime. So, I have lost count of the number of times at op sessions I would tell my guys to slow down. But now you have to slow down, or else. And that is a complete game changer there too.
And I think we talked about that, Lionel, how it's more of a skill. It almost becomes like a video game to an extent of, it's not the regular dial up or throttle, up and down we're used to, that you got to learn how to do this, and you got to have a little finesse and skill to make it stop and do the things you want. This isn't just, the old Tyco Gold Power Pack hand warmer, that'll start and stop on a dime. That suddenly you'd have to practice. I mean, to use and do this, it's amazing the feel and the response that throttle gives out that is so different from anything, whether it's DC or DCC, that I've ever operated before.
One of the things that was really interesting to me when we started demoing that throttle in our booth is, we've demoed it, I think at 3 shows now.
Right.
And it's always interesting to me when you hand it to a prototype railroader. You get one of 2 responses. They go, "Wow, this is amazing. I'm finally running the locomotive the way I run a real locomotive. This feels just like when I'm running the real thing." Or you get, "This feels too much like work. I don't like it."
Yeah, well, that's because it's so realistically replicates what it is to, like, as we have Tim says, it replicates what it is to be like in the cab, which is exactly what we're going for. All right, so Michael, I understand you're an electrical engineer. You're not going to write the great novel. Everybody has in life, everybody has what they're good at. But I'm telling you, people are sitting on the edge of their chairs with bated breath, waiting for you to describe to us the epic journey it was to create this thing. Because I can't imagine you just went to your bench and took a handful of parts and jammed them into a box.
Yeah.
So there was a great. I'm going to be kind of wordy and long-winded, but that's okay, because it's my podcast, which is even better. So there was about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, there was a great Frito-Lay commercial. And basically what it was a guy it was a demonstration, was kind of a takeoff on a YouTube video, and he was going to demonstrate how to make a Frito-Lay. and it 30 goes through the 30 seconds of the commercial, and it's, you take eye and newt, ear of a white rabbit, and blah 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 blah, and you mix it all together, and then he'd go voila, and he'd pull out and he'd get a gold coin, and he'd go, it's another gold coin, and he was trying to make a Frito-Lay. So I had envisioned that you had this massive pile of starts and stops where you would try to make it, and you would get so far, and they're like, no, that's not it, and there'd be this, like a writer with a pile of crumpled papers beside him.
Well, we sort of did that. Again, I go back to the electronics weren't that hard. It's really was finding the components, the switches, the encoders that gave us the right feel. And so there was a lot of back and forth with actually just in AutoCAD or an AutoCAD type program to see how things were going to fit, if it looked like it was going to work, and sending that back to Scott and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Getting samples of parts, putting little handles on them, seeing how they felt. And once we had figured all that out, figured out what components we were going to use for the human interface, the rest of it's really pretty simple. It's just a microcontroller in there and a little radio module, and it's stuff we'd already done, so nothing was really that complicated internally. Writing the software for it is a little more challenging, figuring out how to put all this functionality in a very limited space. One of the design goals was to not have a giant keypad and giant screen on the front of this thing. And so we limited ourselves to this 8x2 LCD screen and 4 buttons, which admittedly does make it a little more challenging to set things up sometimes. But once you have it set up and working, you're not distracted by this giant screen that is unprototypical. Right. And so working through all that, figuring out how to just make a usable interface on the throttle, that was probably another hard piece of it.
So you say 8x2 screen, is that 8 centimeters or something by 2 or centimeters or something? I mean, it's not 8 inches by 2 inches. Or did I mishear you? Or have you left the room?
Oh, I guess I was on mute.
Okay. Yeah, I do that all the time.
I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it's 8 characters wide and 2 lines tall. So you have 16 characters to display all of this information.
So Michael, I bet you learned way more about DCC decoders than you ever wanted to know in this process.
Oh, yes, that too.
You're not punching a whole bunch of different function keys. Can you imagine, on a regular controller, you have F1, F2, F3, F4, and so on to do the same thing his controller is doing, just turning a lever, or flipping a switch. Is so much more simple to me than a regular controller.
So, Michael, are you basically a genius?
No, far from it.
Well, it sounds like it. You know what? It sounds like it to everybody else. It sounds like it. So then you had to interface it with JMRI. Is that where Nathan comes in? So Scott and Michael, let me ask you guys a serious question, because let's face it, nobody's ever going to listen to this, and Nathan's never going to hear it. Is he basically just dead weight, and you two guys are doing all the work?
Oh gosh. No, he's an integral part of the process. Yeah.
Okay. So all right. So now let's talk about let's talk about where do you guys go from here, because you've sold pretty much 250 of these, which is apparently way more than you ever thought. It's not even been a year since I got the deer in the headlights look at the 100 unit mark. Mm-hmm. So, and when did you start selling them?
We started, what was it, at the beginning of April, taking pre-orders, and that went for a month. And then once that was done, we started the first production run, built them through, I think it was most of June, Nathan and I spent building these things, working out the manufacturing process. And then we started shipping right at the beginning of July and have been shipping since. We have another production run that should be available. We should get the parts here at the beginning of October, and we hope to have new throttles available in November.
So that'd be like another 250.
This one's just a run of 100.
Okay. So you say around the end of it. So when did the first one actually come out? Like sell it? End of May, something like that. Middle of June.
Well, you mean not a
Like,
pre-order?
when the first one you shipped out the door. Somebody plunked down their Visa card and you shipped it out the door.
I think the first one shipped, I want to say like June 30th or 31st, right at the end of June.
Okay, so you sold pretty much 250. It's another almost 10 months until we get to June of 2019. So, and I would say that probably a lot of us in the room would think that you'll probably sell another 250 by next June. And when I was with Scott and I asked him if he'd sell 500 in the first year, and he looked at me like a deer at the headlights, doesn't it turn out that I'm basically a marketing genius?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I was right, buddy. I was right. We're sitting there in Chicago at the RPM. George Bogatuk and Matt Herman are fighting over you, and I'm thinking, man, they're going to sell like 500 of these things. I thought I was lowballing you, but you guys are going to sell 500 in a year, no problem.
Mm.
Are you even moderately excited about that?
Oh yeah, we're excited. we're kind of the calm type, you know. Well, you know, you saw me when I interrupted your nice dinner. You know, I was calm then, wasn't I?
No, I don't think so. Annoying, yeah, but not a calm. Nah. I'm just amazed at this thing. I don't know. How about, you know what? I'm going to ask Tom and Tim and Joe. As these three guys have been over at the side, they've been asked to beta test. Are you guys with me on this thing? Like, is this thing not just like this thing is like way more cooler than these guys realized? Am I way off base here, or am I pretty much on the line?
Well, they've been hearing me gush about it for who knows how long now. So I think they have to know what they've got, or at least what I think about it. This is definitely something that I think we're just going to continue to see it grow and grow and grow as more and more people pick it up. I think we're just going to see the adoption of this grow exponentially.
I agree. I think with the more and more people get their hands on them, try them out. It's kind of like word of mouth of something that's very good out there, a good, best kept secret. It's going to be something that you'll see them sell. I don't see us. I think they could probably sell more than 250 between now and next June. Myself.
Me too, but I don't want to scare them. I'm afraid of scaring them. So you guys, how long does it take you to build one, Mike? Can I call you Mike? Are we friendly enough that I could call you Mike, or do you go by Michael?
I go by Michael.
All right, I won't call you Mike then. Can I call you Steve?
No.
So okay, Michael. So how long does it take you to make one of these?
I don't. We kind of figured it out when we were building the first batch. I don't.
You don't tell me. Don't tell me if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, it's not that I don't want to. I just don't. At this point, I don't remember what the number was anymore. I think total, it's of our time. We can get, I think 5 or 6 an hour complete.
Wow.
I think is what it kind of where we were at the end of the last build. Hopefully, we'll get better at that as time goes on.
So do you just have a build party? Is that what you do? Invite a bunch of people over and say, we're going to build Proto throttles tonight.
Well, a bunch of people means Nathan and myself, but yes.
Oh, okay.
So, so Michael, speaking for Nathan, and I think I know that you can speak for him, is Scott pretty much dead weight?
No.
Hey, Lionel, you forgot Scott came back.
Oh, yeah, that's right too. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, that's right. He's right here, isn't he?
I'm used to it.
Okay. You guys have built. It's one of those things. Tony, help me out here. Like, you've seen products come and go. I mean, it's an exciting new product, and it's kind of like, I feel like I'm talking to Henry Ford and going, You know, a lot of people are going to want this thing where they can drive to the store and back in like a quarter of the time.
Here's a good example. We got over to St. Louis, Shane Mason and I. Shane was picking up his Proto Throttle, and we had the AML picnic up in Rochelle, hobby shops to go to. We had this whole weekend of stuff planned, and we had just gotten over in the afternoon to the RPM. He gets his Proto Throttle. He comes and finds me and says, "Okay, we can go home now." So, I mean, it is that kind of excitement.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I guess we've killed an hour and a half here. I don't think Joe and Tim and Tom, I'm glad you guys are here because I don't think we're going to squeeze much more out of Michael tonight. Well, there's something there. Like, I'm like are you going to go, like, Scott, are you going to Springfield? You have got to go to Springfield. Don't keep this a secret. You know what? You owe it to humanity to make this as public as you possibly can.
We're trying. Yeah, I probably will go to Springfield because I just want to go experience that. Buy my plane ticket and fly out. Well, again, Spring Creek's going to be there, so they'll have the demo layout. But I can go there and I can hang out and demo it as much as I want, or try and take in some of the show. Because
don't take it. No, you don't take in the show. You sell the product. You don't have the opportunity you got to sell this product. Well, you got to get. You know what? Just get. There's a guy that has a magazine. The hell's it called? Something to do with railroading. MRH. Model. That guy. Just muscle your way into that guy's booth and take over a third of his booth and set yourself up there.
Sure. That sounds good.
Help me out here, Mr. Fugate. This thing is spectacular, is it not?
Yes, it is. That's fabulous.
All right. Let's finish with this, my favorite subject. Let's see I want to know what each one of you guys, because we got a bunch of interesting guys here, and I already know what Tony thinks. Not that I don't love you, Tony. But, okay. Joe, we'll start, we'll finish with you, Mr. Fugate. Joe Atkinson, what do you think is the hobby growing? Is social media making it growing, or is it getting smaller?
I'm with you. I have to believe that it is growing. I personally, being on the prototype modeling side of the fence, I feel like there is a growth in interest in prototype modeling, and when you see all the new offerings that are made available that are easing that process for everyone, I have to believe that at least that aspect of the hobby is growing, and I think that is just an indicator of the much larger growth of the hobby as a whole.
Mr. Garland, what do you think? What do you think? The hobby growing, getting smaller, staying the same?
No, I think it's growing. Like I said, I have my Seaboard Central Facebook page and YouTube channel, and I pick up new people all the time, and it's just a huge interest in model railroading, because model railroading, it offers so much for people. If you want to weather a car or detail a car, or you want to build a structure, you want to do scenery or whatever, and you see the enthusiasm, and it's of all ages. It's from the young people, all the way up, and I just see so much enthusiasm for it. New products are constantly coming out. I've been in the hobby since I've been 7 years old, and so for the last 40 years, and what they come out with now, it's just amazes me, of the things that you can do and easily do. You don't even have to have a whole lot of skill, and you can have a beautiful layout. And so that it's an exciting time to be in the hobby.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was an exciting time 15 years ago in being the hobby, or 20 years ago, and now it seems like it's even more exciting. Like, I had a friend of mine, Henry Freeman, who's a excellent modeler, and I can remember him and I having a discussion 20 years ago that it was the golden era of model railroading, and yet now this seems like the golden era. Tom, what do you think?
I agree. I agree with Joe and you also. I've met so many great people because of my website and because of the YouTube. I mean, as an example, that was the way I met Tim Garland, was having some YouTube videos. So, the hobby's changing, but I think, like you said, you got to embrace the technology, and by going online and being, through YouTube and through MRH and the forums and all that other stuff. I mean, it's changed, but I think it's growing. And I think also agree with Joe. This is the Proto Throttle just adds to the experience of having a layout.
Right, exactly. All right, Mr. Peterson, what do you think?
I think it's growing. If it's not growing, it's at least holding steady. But I think the emphasis and acceptance of prototype modeling is growing from what I've seen.
Right. And, I mean, being a 40-year-old guy, like, you've probably been in it since you were a kid and everything.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what age, but I would say probably middle of elementary at least.
Sure. All right. Mr. Thornton, what do you think?
I agree with the rest of the group, and I was amazed when I was at the National Train Show because we were sitting right across from all the Lego layouts.
Yes.
And I was amazed at those layouts. I thought, this is fantastic. I mean, if I was a youngster or middle-ager, middle school age, and I saw those Lego trains, I'd be all over that. And I think, gosh, that is so cool for the real young generation that to get them interested in railroading, because those things were amazing, fantastic.
Yes, that's an excellent point. I want to talk to I want to interview one of the people in Lego trains, and that's an excellent point. I think that's a great way to introduce young people to the hobby, because you can end up building a layout out of Lego, and you don't need all the peripheral stuff of scenery materials and all that stuff, and it would be a great way to get introduced into the hobby.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well,
right.
I'd throw one more thing in on that front. I had my wife's niece and nephew visited here a couple of months ago, and they are 7 and 12, and they picked up the Proto Throttles and were knowledgeable and operating on their own and doing so safely in a matter of minutes. And that entire time that they were operating, one thing really stuck out to me is that I never heard them once say, can't we make them go faster? Which was always what I heard in the past when I'd hand them a knob throttle. But
right.
With the Proto Throttle, there is something about, and it was mentioned earlier, about the kind of the skill, the game of skill that's involved in operating it well. And I think that even translates to children of that age, that they get that. They see the fun of trying to operate it in a prototypical manner, and it really jumped out at me that whole complaint about their idea of having fun with running trains before was just making them go faster, and with the Proto Throttle, that's not even a desire. They were so enthralled with the operation that nothing else seemed to matter.
I know. That's an excellent point. We've got to get that Scott Thornton and Michael Peterson guy to get them. We got to get them revved up. Those two guys. All right, Mr. Peterson. What are the two things we've learned here tonight?
You're asking me?
Is there any other Mr. Petersons in the room?
I don't think so.
Okay. Can I call you Steve? No. All right. So, Michael, what have we learned here? We've learned two important things here tonight. One is behind the scenes that we kind of touched on at the start of the show, and another one is we're halfway through the show. We touched on it. Would you like a hint?
Sure.
The first thing we discovered is that I'm an IT genius.
Yes.
Because I managed to get the whole Skype thing going. And the second thing we've learned is that I'm a forecasting genius, because by next June, you will probably have sold 500 of these, which is exactly what I predicted to Mr. Thornton.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think you guys should put me on the payroll. And I hear that you guys are going to be opening a 10,000 square foot factory soon.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to mention that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm sorry. All right. Well, I guess my corner office is gone.
So much for the NDA, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Fugate, man who has his finger on the pulse of the nation. The guy that is how long you been running this here online magazine?
10 years.
10 years. When's the 10-year anniversary, or is it already coming past?
Well, I think 2019 will be the true 10-year anniversary because the January issue number 1 was released January 2009.
Okay, so you're coming up. You're only a few months away from the 10-year anniversary.
Correct.
And have you got any plans of having me on the cover?
That's a good question. We like to put people on the cover every December,
exactly.
So we need to. December's coming quick, Lionel. We need to move quickly here.
Are you about to start? What editorial are you about to write?
I think I'm going to talk about.
Date-wise.
What's that?
What date? Like what month are you about to write? What editorial?
Month? I'm working on October right now.
Yeah, I think back me up on this one, guys. I think it would behoove you to mention you had a great conversation with all these guys about Proto Throttle on A Modeler's Life.
I think I should, yes.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, Joe, come on now. Tell us what's happening in this hobby. You have this magazine. You've been working hard all these years. What is happening in this hobby? Well, which direction are we going?
I agree with the general direction that the hobby's growing. And, if you know where to look, there's a lot of young faces in the hobby. But that's the thing. You have to know where to look. You can't go to just traditional sources anymore. But I also believe the hobby's getting more diverse. So what that translates into is you can be a pre-transition era steam modeler, and it appears that your fellow modelers that do the same thing might be flat or diminishing. But overall, the total hobby is growing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So the era is changing, where it was always, for me, being born in the mid-50s, it wasn't when I started getting serious as an adult model railroader. It was always the 60s, late 60s I was modeling.
Well,
so yeah, so you're meaning the era is changing as the generation.
Yeah,
change.
Well, what happened when you and I got in the hobby back in the 60s, or for some people even in the 50s, 50s and 60s, when you got in the hobby, basically two choices. Am I going to model the modern diesel era, or am I going to model the old steam era? That was basically your choice. There's a little more subtleties than that, but that was basically the choice. Now, what's the choice? Do I want to model contemporary, which is what I see when I look out the window? Do I want to model turn of the century? Do I want to model, the end of the caboose era in the 80s? Do I want to model the Amtrak era when Amtrak was started? Do I want to model the 60s? Do I want to model the steam diesel transition era in the 50s? Do I want to model the World War II era? You get the idea. There's just so many more choices now.
Yeah. So generally, you're buoyed about the hobby. You're excited about where we're going, and there's no need for constant hand wringing.
No, I think it's way overdone, and people will point at things like the loss of hobby shops and local hobby shops. And I would agree with that if local hobby shops were the only thing that's going away. But when you look and see that brick and mortar retail in general is going, Sears closing their doors, it's like, I doubt if it was because they couldn't sell any more train sets.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's the brick and mortar is it's just going away at the total board, and it's like your magazine. It just grows and continues to evolve, and great things are happening.
Yes,
and I don't see a podcast. I've heard of one great model railroad podcast. It grows like crazy.
Yes. Although the magazine is changing, and we'll talk more about that. Yes, we'll talk more about that when we do our state of the hobby.
How long we been doing that now? About what, 20, 21 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
but basically, we're spinning off a new magazine from
Yes.
the MRH magazine. We're keeping the original MRH magazine. We are adjusting the content that's going in the free magazine to match the ad revenue. And we're spinning off a new magazine that's for more advanced modelers. Although we won't forget the beginners either, but we're spinning off a new magazine. And originally I was thinking of just MRH Premium Edition, but then people, and it's not free. This new thing won't be free, but it'll be pretty cheap. It's like $1.99 a copy.
Right.
But we can talk more about that. And
absolutely, we will talk.
I will be talking more about that, and
we will be talking. That'll give us lots to talk about because every year now, for what I think this will be like our actual 5th year we've done the State of the Union, or 4th year. This will be our 4th year, 5th year. Anyways, it's been a while.
Yes, it's been.
Yes, it has. Okay, Mr. Cook, what do you think, buddy? How'd that go?
I think it went pretty well. Can I ask Joe Fugate one question?
Yes.
Sure. If
you'll put Lionel on the cover of your magazine, then I don't have to on mine. So, if there's any holiday spirit and you're willing to do that for December, that'd be great.
Yeah. So throw him a bone, right?
Yeah. I think, boys, this went pretty good. I think we've taught people a lot about the Proto Throttle. Scott, I love you, right, buddy?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Lionel. You showed me love when I crashed your dinner party and you had me give a speech. Yeah, that's real love. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to put this on the free side of the podcast so you can get the most exposure possible.
Wow,
and
great.
I think it's. Well, we've had almost 350,000 downloads in 90 countries around the world. So somebody's going to listen to it. Lots of people are going to listen to it.
Oh, fantastic!
Lots and lots of.
That's great.
And what do you think, guys? I think it went pretty good. Anybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having us on.
Yes. 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs
Good
up.
Talk to all you guys.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you,
Scott. Yes, it was great. It was great meeting. Okay, so Joe and Tim and Tom, I want to interview you guys on the podcast individually, and Michael, I want it'd be great to get you and Nathan on the podcast individually, together. Then you wouldn't have to talk about Scott.
Yeah. Or we could talk about it behind his back.
Exactly. Perfect. All right. Tony, can you give out our email address?
I would be happy to give out our email address. If you'd like to drop us a email, you can do so by writing to modellerslife@gmail.com. Modelers with 1 L, like Proto Throttle.
Wow.
How about that?
Wow.
Nice. And not 2 L's.
Tony's
Not 2 L's like Cadillac.
Yeah, Tony, you have a voice for radio. Really good.
That's why Lionel, we do this. See, I got the voice for radio, and he's got the face for radio. So together, we're great on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So do you think you're going to sell 500 of these? 500? Yeah. No? Okay. Well, how about you think
you predicted it, Lionel. It's going to come true.
It is. All right. And we got a website, amodellerslife.com. All right. That's it. Everybody, on the count of 3, say goodbye. 1, 2, 3.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
It's another Lincoln Homer. Oh, we forgot to get Ralph on again.